connected. Ah. Hello everyone, I'm just going to test the sound here real quick. And it all works. Very good. Very good. Hey everybody, welcome once again to Satsang. It is a joy and a privilege to be here. As always, this is my favorite day of the week for obvious reasons. There's nothing I love doing more than this, than just sitting with friends, having a conversation about the subject which I regard to be the most important subject that there is. And obviously, at least for this 2 hours we're together, you regard it as the most important subject as well. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. You'd be doing what you thought was more important. So it is such a pleasure and such a joy to be able to sit together like this. You know, traditionally, satsang has always been pictured as the teacher and the student, you know, asking questions. And of course, there's, you know, got to be somebody sitting in the front of the room to guide the conversation. But I do like to consider it more of a conversation amongst friends who are together desiring to explore the deeper questions of life, the meaning, the purpose, what is the essential nature of life. And for me, the answer has just become completely clear that the essence of life is consciousness. And another word for that, probably a better word in some cases, is love. The oneness, the unity, the singularity of being is what gives rise to what we experience as love. The nature of consciousness is love. The nature of the pure awareness that we talk about is love. It is not a subject-object love. It's an objectless love. It's more like the sun shining. It just loves because that is its nature. That is our nature. That is your nature. It just loves. It can't do anything else. This is our true nature. This is who we actually are. Now that doesn't mean that we can't become confused, that we can misunderstand our nature, that we can think our nature is something else. But I'm not talking about what we might think our nature is, what ideas we have about ourselves. Because the truth of your being is going to be the truth of your being whether you believe it or not. The truth does not require someone believing in it in order to be true. Lies do, propaganda does, manipulation does. That requires you believing it in order for it to be sustained. But it is weak because the moment this truth is seen, in that very moment, the lie, the mistake, the illusion vaporizes. Because the truth is self-luminous. And when you see it, you know it. Why? Why is it that when you see truth, you know it? Because it's your nature. You are the truth. You're looking in the mirror, and when you look in the mirror, you recognize yourself. When you see love expressed in some form, and it could be any form, you know, a mother and child, to people walking down the street holding hands, love of your work, the love of a sport or entertainment, a movie, a song. It doesn't matter the particular form that it takes. The essence of it, the essential energy of it is all the same. It is the same love, the same shared love across every different way, and there are an infinite number of ways that it gets expressed. The simple, direct character, spirit, energy experience of being is shared. It is not, you don't have your being and I have my being. When we just sink into our own hearts and just quietly, in meditation, feel that ever-present sense of your existence, what you're feeling and what I'm feeling is identical. It is the same thing. It is like space. We're all in the same space. The walls of a room don't actually disconnect space, do they? The space permeates these walls. It permeates the ceiling. It permeates everything. And so we all live in the same space. In the same way, that's a metaphor that we all share the same being, our same essential nature. And that's the unity we feel. That's the love we feel, that shared being. We're different faces on the same soul. And so the shining through of this essence, this indescribable, unknowable essence, reflecting itself in countless forms, is the eye through which I'm inviting you to look, to not see the forms that are appearing as the final word or the final term, but as a momentary reflection of that which is the ultimate, the absolute, the final, which is your being. I got this question from somebody that I wanted to answer because it's very simple, and this leads up to it, what we were just talking about. And he says, what is God, and how do I get closer to it? Well, what I'm describing, that unity of being, that shared being, that shared space in which we all are, that ineffable, transcendent, reflected in all the different forms, the religious name for that is God. The street name for it is me. It is that sense of being. You knowing yourself. You aware of yourself. Awareness aware of itself. Love loving itself. That's God. And how do you get closer to it? Well, you can't get any closer to it. How can you? How can love and that which expresses love be anything other than love, right? How can you get any closer? How can you get any closer to the reflection in a mirror? It's you. But we just make the mistake of mistaking the image in the mirror as the original, as the actual substance. And it's not. It's just an image. All of life, the entire universe, is God pondering her own nature. God knowing herself. And I like the feminine pronoun simply because it tends to capture more the gentleness, the closeness, the birth from her own body, rather than sitting on the side as a participant. The actual, the whole beauty of life giving birth to life, and then receiving life back in death to be recycled, it is is the perfect metaphor for love constantly giving life to everything. We feel separated from it. We feel disconnected from it. That feeling of disconnect, that sense of being separate and somehow trying to find a way to get back to God, to come closer again, is the essence of the illusion, and every spiritual practice that is for real directs itself at dispelling and dissolving the belief. And it is a belief. The truth is the truth. You and God are one. You and love are one. There's not two there. There is no separation. But the consciousness, in order to experience form, precipitates itself to see things from a particular perspective. And in that perspective arises the sense of there being a separation. Well, there isn't a separation. How can there be? If the nature of God is consciousness, then what is hearing my words right now? Well, that's consciousness, is it not? I mean, isn't the most characteristic attribute of you your consciousness? Without that, would there be anything else? Isn't that the most essential? Well, if consciousness is God, then how much closer can you get? The word close, the word intimate, don't even cover it, because even closer intimate implies some distance, that there are two. There aren't two. There isn't a God and you trying to get together or trying to become reconciled. The belief that there is what gives rise to all the suffering, all the problems, all of the evils and horrific things that are going on in the world have all arisen from that fundamental belief. That belief is the sum and substance of the egoic mind. The egoic mind is simply the thoughts that believe that you have been separated from life, that somehow the fountain has gotten separated from its source. If that were to happen, the fountain would simply not exist. There'd be no fountain. So we only imagine ourselves disconnected, when in fact, if you just look and notice that the single constant, the thread that runs throughout all experience, is your awareness of it. Without that, there's nothing. Awareness is life. Awareness is being. Consciousness and awareness, I'm using synonymously. They are life. Sat, Chit, Ananda. They are. It is being. It is awareness of being, which is one and the same, and it is the happiness that arises from knowing that. The mission, the work, the practice, if you will, is to simply become rooted, established there, so that you are no longer believing the thoughts that recur about being a separate self. It's just a thought. It's not real. You haven't actually become separate. There's just the belief that you have. And as such, in that belief, you have believed all of the thoughts that are going along with that, are supporting it, are encouraging it, are agreeing with it. And of course, when you agree with a particular thought, other thoughts like it tend to collect. So we're hitting it right at the center of it. And the practice then is holding that realization, recognizing that even though I've come to see that there's all sorts of habitual patterns that are active in the nervous system that are producing thoughts and feelings as if I was a separate self, even though I'm not. So the feeling is there, even though it's not the truth. That's where wisdom comes into play. That's where practice comes into play. That's where meditation comes into play. That's why inner reconciliation, allowing, all of the various, that's where they come in. They're not going to reconcile you with the truth of your being. You don't need to be reconciled with that. You simply need to clear away all of the beliefs and emotional patterns that were based on the assumption that you weren't. And that's the only reason they're there. And they're just well rehearsed. And as you become more and more adept and more, as you see it more and more, as you withdraw your attention more and more, your conviction becomes stronger, which of course makes you withdraw more for those, until finally the arising of the thought of a separate self becomes so absurd that they don't even arise anymore. Because they come up and you immediately go, no. And that undercurrent, the deep undercurrent, the vasanas, the repository consciousness from which these things are bubbling up, is itself being purged of the erroneous notion of a separate self, which is deeper than just your conscious mind. This is a belief that lays almost silently at the root of human consciousness. And we're in the process, just through moving deeper and deeper, further and further away from the beliefs, and deeper into the recognized truth of your experience, that you are experiencing oneness right now and not a separate self. The more that happens, the more grounded you become, the more open, the more happy. And that, of course, is the ultimate goal. If there is a goal for spirituality, it's that. It's not to be enlightened. It's not to know all sorts of things. It's to simply be happy. All right, enough. I've gone on and on and on. Please remember to like and share. I'm already well behind on questions. So let's see. Oop, I need to keep this plugged in. Let's see what we got here. Lisa F., or is it Lisa? Anyway, howdy. Greetings from East Coast. Hello to you. Sean, Spiritual Revolutionary. Hey, mate, from Scotland, land of the brave and cold. Good to have you here. The Sunshine Fee. Hello from Holland. Hello, Sunshine. I responded to the comment you made on my YouTube earlier. So the event I'm going to be doing, the workshop I'm going to be doing on EFT is online. So you can very much come and we can take up your question in specific there. If you don't want it to be public, I can just take it off of what you meant on the comments. If it's too private for you, we can talk about it. It'll be live. We can actually talk, right, and not just chat. Those of you who don't know about that, I'm doing a workshop and a series of videos all about EFT, and as energy healing technique, overcoming conditioning. One of the means I use for overcoming the conditioned patterns that are convinced that you're a separate self. EFT works on many, many levels, but when you understand that the fundamental energy disruption is the belief in being a separate self, it takes it to another level. So it's not strictly a non-dual presentation. I'll be talking about it just in very general terms. But if you're on my mailing list, you've already gotten 2 of the videos. The third one's coming out tomorrow, and there'll be 4 more leading up to Thursday, which is when the live workshop is. So by all means, just go to gpwalsh.com/IRTAP. Excuse me. And if you're not on my mailing list, and you'll be on it, and you'll have access to all the videos. So Dave Rose, hi GP. Dave Rose from Fall River, Massachusetts. Hi Dave. Sean, what is it we ate not seeing? What is it we ate not seeing? are. Okay, I see you continued it. All right, what is it? I thought we ain't not seeing. I've been practicing feeling into being and not thinking mostly. Um, okay, well then, if you've become reasonably adept at that, where you can actually be present with your feelings, then the next step is to start inquiring them. I mean, ultimately, we get to the point where, from where are these feelings arising? Are they arising, and in their arising, pointing back to the sense of a separate self, which is what all suffering does, or are they pointing towards the infinite, illimitable love that is the true self? So when a feeling arises, the first step is to be willing to be with it, because if you're fighting with it, that inner conflict will just kind of demand all the time. But once you can be with it, you can begin to look at it intelligently. You can start moving closer to it. You can begin to drop your story about what it is, what it means, why it's here, what it's for. You can drop all your resistance to it. And eventually it comes to be just a pure sensation without a story. It can be an intense sensation, for sure, but without a story attached to it. The suffering of it will dissipate. And once the suffering of it dissipates, the energy itself will not have anything to sustain it. And it will eventually simply dissolve. When a feeling comes up, an uncomfortable feeling especially, or a painful feeling comes up, there's a tendency first to resist. Right? So the first thing I have people do is to notice the resistance is there, but don't do what the resistance is telling you to do. The resistance is telling you to get away from it, move away from it in some way, distract yourself, anything. Just don't feel it. So the first step is to note this resistance, and don't fight that. Don't resist resistance. That's kind of a waste of time. Notice that it's there. Notice that that's the habit. The feeling comes up, the resistance, and then the resistance always wants you to take some kind of an action. You have always taken that action in the past, which is why it became a rehearsed habit. But if you instead don't take the action that the resistance is wanting you to do, you don't go with the habitual pattern, and instead turn more of your attention towards the feeling, right? Eventually, at first it can be very difficult, but eventually the resistance will dissipate and you'll move closer to the feeling. Now, as you move closer to the feeling, with less resistance, there's less story, there's less argument. And you find that it's not as nearly as difficult to be with as the resistance had led you to believe when you actually spend the time to do it. Now, what you're doing in that moment is you are becoming a pure, enlightened witness. You are becoming the peacemaker. You are treating yourself and your inner experience with love. And now as you move towards it, as the story drops away, it becomes pure experience without a story. And without a story, even the name you might have for it, right? Anxiety or fear or loneliness, whatever, even that word falls away in the pure experience itself. And then you can look at that experience. And you can begin to ask yourself, to whom is this experience appearing? Now notice, without consciousness, there is no experience. So there's no such thing as an experience, however intense and difficult, that can separate you from the consciousness that is your being. Because if it could, you'd become unconscious of it, and it wouldn't be there anymore, right? The very fact that you are aware of it means that consciousness is still present. You have not been disconnected. There is no experience you can have that can disconnect you from consciousness, your true being, because if you did, you wouldn't have the experience. You simply would not be. You wouldn't exist. Right? So at that point, your attention goes more towards the consciousness to which it's appearing than the content of consciousness, no matter what shape it has. And of course, that's attention going completely 180 back in towards itself. That is the mind or the attention going back to its source, that which enables all experience to take place. And so now you become the pure presence of awareness in which everything is happening. Now take it to that step. Then there's one more step we take. But I think that will do for now. Sean, spiritual revolutionary. John Watson. Hi, John. Hi from Glasgow. Hello. Hi from Seattle. John, question. How do I spot beliefs and stop believing those ideas? Well, anything that says to you, you are a separate self is a belief. It's really pretty simple. Just look at any thought. And every thought has an origin. Thoughts don't think themselves. They don't come out of nowhere, right? They have an origin. They reflect something. If you follow a thought back to its source, you identify whether or not it's the truth or its belief. If it is life affirming, if it is telling you that you are lovable, wonderful, valuable, that's emerging from the true self. If it's telling you you're a wreck, you're trouble, you're not getting it, you know. But remember, it always speaks in first person. It doesn't say you're not getting it. It says I'm not getting this. Oh, I just don't get it. This is so hard. I am overwhelmed. That's a favorite one that it likes to come up with. So you just look at it. What is the character of it? If you're not sure, sit with it for a little bit. Chew it. You know, be with it. It doesn't have to be an instantaneous decision. This is what Christ was referring to when he told the parable of the wheat and the chaff. For those of you who might not be familiar, which probably nobody, but in this context, it's extremely appropriate. He told the story of a man who had a field of wheat. And during the night, his enemies came and they planted tares in the wheat. Now, tares are a weed, right? And they, like anything else, they grow close together. And so his workers said, "Well, look, here's what's happened. There's all sorts of weeds growing now. So shall we pull them up?" And he says, "No, don't pull them up, because if you pull them up too soon, you're going to pull the wheat up with it. But wait until the harvest, and then you can see clearly and separate the wheat from the tares." So that's kind of the thing. You spend some time with it, and not just you follow its thought back to its origin, but how does it feel? The true self never makes you feel bad. So if there's a thought that's triggering something that's bad, either there is a negative reaction to that thought, and the thought could be good, or the thought is simply arising from the sense of a separate self. Remember, the root of all of the thoughts and feelings that we suffer from, the root of them is the belief in a separate self. So if you can take any thought and trace it back and find that belief, you see that it is a reflection of the one belief. When you say, how do I spot beliefs? You don't need to spot beliefs. There's only one. This makes the entire non-duality makes this whole thing so simple. It's not like you've got an army of beliefs that you have to overcome. They all come from one place. I have to first identify myself as a separate self. Then I can have an issue with money or relationships or intimacy or abuse or any kind of problem. All the other problems and beliefs will arise out of that, because they're all a reflection of the sense, the illusory sense of being disconnected from your true source. Who are you? Now, notice there's a belief and there is a consciousness that is aware of it. Now, just a belief is just a thought that has been regarded as true. Both the thought and the thought that regards that as true are both being perceived from the same place. If you can see that, and again bring the attention back to the place from which they are being seen, you have access to the wisdom that will clearly be able to discern between the wheat and the tares. If you make it a personal thing, I am going to have to sort out all of these beliefs, which is what happens in personal development and self-help. The essential nature of that I is not questioned. Right? And so that I, which is the false self, is trying to improve its own beliefs. Right? It's like the sick person administering his own medicine. It's kind of the humorous idea behind self-help. You know, the one who's broken trying to help themselves get better. I mean, it's giving medicine to a ghost. The unless you get to the root of all of those, you're just going to have more and more and more and more of them. You're just never going to run out. There'll be no center to that onion, just layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, because the source of them is still there producing them, right? You have to shut off the water at the source, not just keep trying to plug the drip, right? Because it just moves over and drips off somewhere else. So you don't have a lot of beliefs. You only have one. That's all you have to concern yourself with. Who am I? Now, to answer that question, you simply go to the place from which all things are being seen. Even that sense of all the qualities and attributes and characteristics that we experience, that we attribute to a separate self, are all being perceived by consciousness. It is self-evident, if you just stare at it for a while, that your essential nature is consciousness, because without that, there is no experience. You do not exist. So what we're doing is not trying to get rid of beliefs, but to discover the true nature of consciousness. That is, the true nature of yourself. When you know yourself as you are, beliefs fall away. They can't stand. They can't be there. You can't believe them, because they all refer to something that you're not. And when you know that you're not that, the beliefs just, they don't make any sense. You go, well, what? Whatever. Are you following this? I'm trying to move you to the place where this gets a whole lot easier. There's a long time when I was practicing more spiritual healing and that sort of stuff, and a period of time when I was examining psychological and various kinds of healing processes, to help people I was working with and myself. I found that there was this endless stream that never ran dry, and there was always a reforming of the sense of self. It just always popped up again, and that it became clear to me the only way to truly bring about healing was to address the one belief from which all the rest were coming, and that is something exists other than the true self. So I'm just going to keep pointing you back to there, and your mind will say, yeah, well, that's really hard. We got to just kind of pluck away at a few of those. Well, you can, for lifetimes. Or you can go right to the source. Don't believe your mind when it says this is hard. It's not. It's not hard to be yourself. It's really hard to be somebody you're not. It takes nothing to be happy. It takes an enormous amount of effort to be unhappy. Thank you, John Q. Ava says, Namaste, G and everybody. Sally Atherton, hi everyone. Sally from Southeast England. Wonderful to see you here. See you on here, GP. Good to have you, Sally. Sarah, my friend Sarah. Hi, G. Great to be here. Much love for you and everyone here today. Sarah from France. Wooter. Hi, Wooter. Hello there, Mr. Walsh. Mr. Walsh was my father, and he's been dead for almost 50 years. So, almost 50 years. So I'm just GP or G. Recently, I am a bit torn between all the lessons the 25-year-old Buddha advised and the non-lessons you and many others speak about. Sort of seeking through his lessons or just letting it all go, not seek sort of thing. Hard to put into words. Any thoughts about doing lessons versus not doing lessons? I'm not 100% sure what you mean by that, but there's a whole bunch of different flavors of Buddhism. And to me, the one that hits the nail on the head is Zen. And there was a big split historically in Buddhism between the northern school and the southern school. The progressive school, which we know as Theravada, Hinayana, the Tibetan school, where you basically practice for years and years and years. It's always refinement, purification, letting go of desires. But in contrast to that is the one that became Zen, which is the Southern school. And there was a big split there. And clearly, the Southern school, the Zen school, is the non-dual path, but they're both Buddhism. And if you really read enough of the sutras of the Buddha, and they can be kind of hard to read because there's a lot of stuff in there. But if you do, you discover that he had all sorts of different ways of teaching for different people. For some people, I would advise a path of meditation and practice. I'll be teaching a class on EFT. There's other people I would not bother teaching them to EFT. I've gotten a couple of questions from people saying, well, should I be doing this? I said, no, not you. I gave that teaching was for somebody else because this is what they need right now. They're not ready to jump into this sense of pure awareness, although everybody is ready to do that. But in the Buddhist teaching, if you read the Heart Sutra, you find that the essence of the Heart Sutra is the dismantling of all of the Buddhist teachings, including the most fundamental of all, which is the Four Noble Truths, the Four Noble Truths of suffering. And even that he shows to be empty of any empty of a self, that is empty of any absolute meaning. That's all it means, that it is a convention. It is a temporary means to bring someone to the point where they can go beyond. The Prajnaparamita, the ultimate mantra, Gate Gate Padagate Padasamgate Bodhisvaha, which means gone, gone, gone beyond, gone completely beyond, which means you've gone beyond all opposites. You're now in the realm of the purely transcendent. And that's what the non-dual path is. Now, in that process, it's not that we completely abandon the progressive. I wouldn't say don't meditate, don't do anything. There's a lot of teachers who would say that. Don't meditate, don't do anything. There's nothing to do. There's no one here to do it. Well, okay, fine. Then why are they out teaching, right? I mean, you need in every moment something that leads you to the next moment, to the ultimate seeing. And the ultimate seeing is there have been no steps, there's been no path, there's been no moments happening. But that needs to be seen. And in the Lankavatara Sutra, Buddha puts it away. I've not seen in any other sutra. He referred to it as the personal realization of Buddha knowledge. Because if you just say, well, it's all the Buddha, or there's nothing other than on this truth, but it hasn't really sunk in and become your everyday experience, it's not really truthful. It's not really the Buddha's teaching. The experience of awakening happens to awakening. Consciousness awakens to itself and finds that this whole path of falling asleep, the fall, going through ordeals, rediscovering the truth and waking up, the entire thing has been a dream. But as a concession to the dreaming consciousness, various teachings are provided, are offered, all of which do the magic of turning the attention back around to realize that that which is aware of the dreaming and the dreamer was never asleep in the first place, was in the audience, enjoying the show, as it were, enjoying the play. And sometimes the play is fun, it's a romantic comedy, sometimes it's sci-fi, sometimes it's tragedy, it's a Shakespeare play where the last scene is the stage covered in dead bodies. But it is the play of consciousness. So whatever lesson happens in the moment is to be seen not as you trying to wake up, but as the fruit of the awakening that is always happening. It is a manifestation of awakening. It is not actually a path to awakening. Can you follow that? It's very subtle. It's very subtle, it's not easy to put into words, and it's not easy to grasp, because we think of ourselves as being the seeker, someone trying to attain. Now, the Neo-Advaita teachers that you make reference to are right in the sense, well, there isn't anybody there to attain. But if you get stuck in the absolute and will not make a concession to the dreamer, you have actually created a different kind of a dream. And I've talked about that before, the difference between the Arhat and the Bodhisattva. The one who seeks enlightenment for themselves and the one who seeks enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. Big difference, and Buddha clearly favored the latter. Matter of fact, he said, I had been a Bodhisattva in 500 lifetimes before becoming the Buddha. And the Buddha simply means the awakened one. Not one who has awakened, but the one, the awakened one. The one awakening to itself. Awakeness, awakening to its own awakeness. So there's not somebody waking up. And if you see it this way, you realize that what you are experiencing is the manifestation of the eternal awakeness that has always been here. Can you see the subtle difference? Can everybody get the subtle difference in that? I think I'll leave it at that for right now. And let me know if that's like hitting home, because what it does is it transcends both the progressive path and an absolute path, but in transcending it doesn't eliminate any of it. It subsumes it all into the ineffable, that which is beyond the absolute and relative, which are very, very subtle, a very subtle duality, a necessary one for us to be able to approach the absolute. But they too are not the final term. The final term, you just might say, is just simply total surrender to being the ordinary human being. That is, a surrender to this moment as it's appearing, realizing that the moment as it's appearing is just the appearance of that which is eternal and infinite. Okay, thank you, Wooder. Hi from, hello from DCMD. Daryl Sanders. Hi, Daryl. Sally Atherton. Hi, GP. I experience my feelings in my mind, e.g., I know when I'm sad, but I don't experience this feeling from my body. My body sensation remains neutral. Why is that? Well, if it is neutral, then it's not sadness. Then it's your mind remembering sadness and looking for some kind of evidence for it. The mind does not feel. It has no capacity for feeling. It is pure representation. It is pure imagery, right? Words, sounds, anything. In order for a feeling to be remembered, it has to be felt. So what I'd encourage you to do is when it appears in the mind like that, turn your attention towards the body and really stay with the body. Once it's appeared in your mind, you no longer need to pay it any attention whatsoever. Completely take your attention away from it. Say, thank you, I don't need you right now, and just go into the body. If the body really is neutral, you can just let go of it. But it could be that there is a sadness there, and the neutrality is actually just kind of a numbness that doesn't want to feel it. It's kind of a distraction. It is a way in which you've masked it, right? And so be willing to be with the neutrality for a while to make sure that it is what it appears to be, which means you simply receive it as a neutral feeling or a non-feeling. You be present with it because something's there, otherwise you couldn't say it's neutral. Something is there. So whatever it is, don't put a name on it. Don't say it's intense or easy or neutral. Just be with it and see what happens. It'll either just dissolve back into just kind of this hum, the om of the background, or you may find that it's actually just trying to obscure something through kind of clouds, a cloudiness, that there is some real unprocessed material that needs to come to the surface, some kind of a sadness or maybe even a deeper grief. You never know, and you just stay with it until it feels clear, right? And then just be wide open to it. But minds don't feel. They remember. They might associate and think I should be feeling sad now or something, right? But they don't actually do the feeling. Nonetheless, an underlying sadness, even if it's very repressed, can kind of leak out as a thought. So you don't just ignore it. You say, okay, I hear you, and turn your attention. It's always about being open and allowing to what you're feeling, because that's the only way you stay grounded and rooted. One of the problems with Neo-Advaita teaching, some of the stuff I just said about its awareness, aware of itself, is that it can become a tool of the egoic mind. It can usurp that. It can commandeer those non-dual phrases to continue to suppress the unhandled energy, the stuff that's going on in your nervous system that needs to be lovingly brought out and liberated. So that's one of the reasons I constantly bring people back to the experience of the heart and in the body, and not let them stay in the absolute like that. Some people who get a little bit too much, I bring them out and bring them into the absolute. Some people are in the absolute, I bring them into their body. Right? And Buddha used to do that, Somebody would ask him a question. One time he'd say, yes, that's correct. Somebody would ask the same question. He'd say, no, it's not correct. Because he was seeing the meaning behind it that those words were giving life to. The meaning wasn't in the words. The meaning was in the energy that was behind the words. And so the very same question can get two different answers depending on the circumstance and the person and the environment and all of that. So we have to be completely open in our hearts to our whole experience and not just try to gloss over it with spiritual ideas or I'm going to be a good spiritual person now or some non-dual concept. That's not legitimate. That's kind of like trying to sneak out the back door. There's no discounting in non-dual inquiry. It is an open-hearted examination of the totality of experience. It is a diving into the suffering to get to the end of suffering. And we find that when we do that, that the end of suffering is the realization that there is no sufferer. But you can't get to that if you're always avoiding that feeling or trying to repress it or trying to explain it away in some way. You dive right smack dab into the middle of it. That's the story of the Bodhisattva. They dive into it. They don't try to go to nirvana and then disappear. They dive into the hell and liberate all beings, including themselves, from the hell. Does that answer it for you, Sally? Ivan, hello from Bulgaria. Hello, Ivan. Hi from Dublin, from Nazarene. Nazarene Golden. Hi, Nazarene. H. Beck, is it true that there cannot be somebody to believe the thought of a separate self? Is that the thought that I have believed, and in a self itself is a thought that is seen? Wow. I get it. You're right. He says it next to struggling with mental understanding, contra really, whatever that is, realizing that no separate self is here. H. Beck equals Hendrik from the south of Germany. Hi, Hendrik. Thank you for giving me your first name. I like that. Ooh, great question. Let's dive into that. The thought of I is not the I. Simple. It's a thought, right? Now that thought of I can be associated with the body, mind, emotions, associations, memory, gender, beliefs. It can associate with, so when I say I can be referring to my beliefs, I can be referring to my body, I can be referring to, which means my gender or my race, I can be referring to my religious upbringing, I can be referring to my class, my culture, right? That I is an image then, can be referring to an image you're holding of yourself. Now, that image we're holding of ourselves, deeply believed, right, becomes what we call the separate self. You are believing that that thought of I is you. Now, here's the magic in this, though. Who's believing that? Right? Now, it's not just enough to say, well, there's no self to believe that. That's actually true, but if you go to that place prematurely and try to skip a step, you're going to get yourself into trouble. The first thing you need to see is that this sense of a separate self, this image of a self, is a finite image, clearly. But it is an image being perceived by something else. Now, there's a sense of I that says, this is me, and it can be a very strong sense. But even that sense of I identifying with that self-image is also being perceived by something. There is an I, clearly. Something is hearing my words right now. Something is typed this question. Something is conscious of the entire experience. So when you say, I am believing in a self, it is very, very subtle. At first you start by just saying, yes, there's an I. The sense of consciousness has identified with the self, with this false image. And you see that it's a false image, and your attention now, the sense of I begins to return home, back to the sense of being pure consciousness. And you see that you, I, was identified with it. That's a big step. rather than just being this person struggling to try to get to know God or to get enlightened. You realize that the enlightenment is not somebody waking up, it's waking up from the somebody. And so now you, okay, so I believed that that was me. I don't believe that anymore. So I'm dismantling all of that. The thoughts about are coming up and I'm not believing them anymore. And this is a great place to be. It's a great part of the process. As that deepens, you'll begin to realize that even that sense of identification, the I that was identifying with it, is itself being perceived by something even more subtle. And you realize that anything perceived is an image, it's a reflection. It isn't you. So even the believer of the image is being perceived by consciousness. And this is the deeper thing that you're referring to. But I don't want you to jump it. I want you to get there step by step so that it's absolutely crystal clear and you don't skip a step and become confused. Because if you try to skip over that, well, there is no believer then, right? And it gets very much in your head. It becomes very intellectual. It becomes neo-Advaita, right? So don't do that. Actually take each one of the steps. Because, I mean, when you realize that the image in your mind isn't you and that you have been identifying with it, you have, you know, its days are numbered, right? You know, it's, you know, you've made it to level, you know, 800 of your video game, right? So now it becomes a matter of that simply deepens. That simply deepens until you eventually see that there's never been anybody who's even been identified. The entire picture was a dream, and that consciousness was never identified with it. But this consciousness is transcendent. That is, it is beyond all the opposites. It's neither identified nor not identified. It neither exists nor does not exist. Now, you cannot approach that level of non-dual inquiry intellectually. It becomes a matter of seeing. So, step one, and this is really the way I'll teach it in courses and that sort of stuff, is to realize that what you have been calling yourself are conditioned patterns of the nervous system. They are functions of life. They're simply the way things operate, the way the human nervous system adapts itself to an environment. But then consciousness, the sense I am, projects on that bundle of functions the sense of a self which belongs rightly to itself, and thus a sense of being a separate self gets created. So now we reverse that process and we just start stepping back until we arrive at pure consciousness. But you don't need to arrive at pure consciousness to immediately begin to experience the fruits of disidentification, until finally you realize that pure consciousness is the I, the ultimate I am, and that even the sense of I am is perceived by the absolute consciousness that is beyond any categorizations, any duality, any ability to articulate. It is prior to thought, so we can't talk about it. It's just what happened. It is the reality that is hearing my words right now. Does that clarify it for you, Hendrik? It's very subtle. Got some really subtle questions here. This is great, fantastic. So does that answer? I think I articulated that pretty well. Doesn't matter. I just say whatever comes to my mind. So it's not like I've worked this all out. I listen and the thoughts come. The questions invoke the answers. They just don't come on their own. So thank you, Hendrik. Eli, hello Eli. Hello from Whitewater, Wisconsin. Carrie Brogan says, hi G. Hi Carrie. Daniel Burr. Hey GP, greetings from Denmark. Your vids really resonate with me. Thanks for being. Good, good, good. I'm so glad. Sean, spiritual revolutionary. Gee, how do we not be separate? Sean, first you have to grasp that you are not. You believe you are. And therefore, that belief being so strong, that belief colors your experience. The fact of the matter is, you never experience being separate. That's not the actual experience. The actual experience of essential oneness is what's happening, and the mind is projecting a sense of separation on it, saying, I'm bounded by this form. You're not. You drop that belief. Now, you can't just drop it and say, okay, I'm going to reject that thought, I'm going to reject that thought. You have to go deeply enough into it so you really actually see it. So a meditation where you look at this boundary of the skin, which we consider to be the limits of my existence. And in that meditation, you just feel the boundary of your skin. And then notice that this boundary, where consciousness seems to be contained, is something appearing in consciousness. And the more you explore that, you realize that that sense of a boundary is actually in consciousness. Consciousness is not in the body is in consciousness. And suddenly everything you experience, everything your senses are aware of, you see, are in consciousness. And now you keep expanding it and see if you can find a boundary to it. Well, you can't. And if there's no boundary to it, it's infinite. If it's infinite, there's no end to it. If there's no end to it, there's no separation from anything. Everyone is within your consciousness, and you are within theirs. It is infinitely, it's like fractals, right? So you're diving into that to increase the conviction. And as that increases, the ideas that come up, the habitual ideas of being a separate self, you see them for what they are: belief, not a truth, not a fact, an assumption that you simply didn't know to question, an assumption that is excuse me, is a tacit agreement in our culture. Materiality, separation. You are your body, they are their body. There's this sensory experience we have of each other. And non-dual inquiry is the challenge of that. Is that real? Is that true? And when you actually look at it, you find it's not. No one has ever experienced separation. No one. You're not experiencing separation now. You're experiencing consciousness. You're experiencing everything within consciousness and no separation whatsoever. That's what you're actually experiencing. Nobody ever has experienced separation. Everybody has believed separation, and they're projected on the experience of oneness, the imaginary, illusory, and might I add, suffering-causing sense of separation, and all the thoughts, emotions, and experiences that would go with it. So that's how you do it. Thanks, Sean. Carrie Brogan, I'm having trouble at the moment with the justifiable rage at what is happening in this country, Australia. Oh, so are we here. And it's interesting how I don't really want to let the rage go. This is really important. When you use the word rage, anger and its intense form, which is rage, which is really anger out of control. You know, anger isn't a bad thing, right? Anger is us going. First off, it's a way in which on a purely physiological level, It's simply the way in which the nervous system, the body, gets ready to protect itself. It's either going to run away or it's going to have to fight. Fear is the feeling, the sensation of the body preparing to run, to flee, to get out of Dodge, whereas anger is the body, the focusing of all the energy to defend itself, because it's been threatened. Now, we are being threatened. Australia, America, European Union. I mean, all over the place. The tyranny of a world economic system run by madmen should invoke our anger because it is threatening. Now, what we have to do, it is, there's nothing wrong with that. There's a time when you just say, stop. No, this is not acceptable. And we can clearly tell the difference between what is loving is not and what isn't. You don't have loving. To be loving simply means you're aligned with the truth. And you're not going to hurt anybody. I'm not going to harm these people that are, but I'm also not going to believe them. And anybody who wants to know my feelings about it, I'm happy to talk about it. What we want to address isn't somehow getting rid of the rage, because the rage arises when you don't feel you have any power, when you feel disempowered. That's when rage arises. That's when the anger gets out of control. What we have to discover is the power of truth. The power is always with truth. I don't know if humanity is going to make it, if we're going to wipe ourselves out. I know that the only way in which humanity as a whole will step into the next level of the manifestation of form that we are experiencing is through what is happening. If you look at your own life, how much have you learned from all the pleasant experiences, and how much have you learned from the adversity? Hands down, adversity teaches us, makes us wise. The pleasurable moments are great. They're wonderful, but any spiritual teacher would tell you, if you are pursuing a life of nothing but pleasurable moments, you are really going to be in trouble. That's what all the teaching of law of attraction and you can have it all is all about. It's this idea that somehow we can have nothing but pleasurable moments. Well, you'd be stupid. I mean, you would be just a dumbass, because we grow when we're challenged. That's the nature of things. You run into an obstacle and you grow to the point where that obstacle can collapse in front of you. And they say in Zen, there's not an obstacle in your path. The obstacle is your path. This is life. We're not here to try to avoid it. And so when you see something that is wrong, and you get that feeling, it is a mixture of, yes, it's wrong. And in this particular moment, you might not be able to do anything about it, literally or physically. But believe me, when something comes into your mind, and I really should do an entire class on this because it's so powerful. Anything that comes into your consciousness is now yours. It is yours to do with as you will. So when something comes in, when I see some really horrendous act taking place and it comes into my consciousness, I bring it in as if it is my own experience that I have to dissolve the sense of there being a separate self about. Now, it's hard because you see things like that happening, but the only reason they can happen is because there is a sense of there being a separate self. Now, we are not separate. We are one. So if I resolve that, bumping the mic, sorry. If I resolve that for me, I am simultaneously resolving that for the rest of the world. This is a very different way of approaching spiritual healing. You're doing it simply within the confines of your own consciousness. What has appeared is the belief in a separate self that is doing horrible things. If you see it as an element of your own consciousness, you see that it is a belief, and that the substance of it is your belief in it. And so you begin to dismantle all beliefs in there being anything other than the one self. This is what is meant by the bodhisattva. It is not he's going out there to convince people they should become saved. He's saving it all within your own consciousness. You are being invited to believe that there is a separate self. First, you, right? And as that deepens, as you see you are not a separate self, you can see it that other people have the belief of being a separate self, or you could see that the other person is your belief in a separate self, and you begin to withdraw into a much deeper, more universal truth within you. But you do both. You don't use that as a way of escaping it. So that's where I'll go. But, when somebody asks me a question about things, I'll say, no, this is absurd. This is not loving. This is not Christian. I mean, I'm really hard on the TV preachers and the like who are forever saying, yeah, we should go to war again. I mean, it has nothing to do with Christianity. The modern fundamentalist Christianity is heresy. This is blasphemous to the teachings of Christ. Blessed are the peacemakers. Hello? Read the damn book. So as you could see, I don't mince words with that sort of stuff. But at the same time, I'm constantly taking responsibility for what I admit to my consciousness as being true. Is there a separate self? No, there is not. So what we're seeing in the world is the universal manifestation of the belief of a separate self, as opposed to just my individual one. I am now not just me, I am us. It is I, we, Gaia, right? So does that answer it for you? This is why it's so critical. We have to make this journey first. We have to go inside and see and break through the illusion of the separate self for ourselves. But when we do that, we naturally turn our attention back outwards, right? And at first, it really happens on two levels. On one, I do this. I show people, breaking through their own illusion. But at the same time, I'm breaking through my illusion that says there isn't any separate self out there, nor is there anybody who believes in a separate self or who's been suckered into a separate self. There is no separate self. There is only consciousness. Does that answer it for you, Carrie? Where did I get this red thing on my head? Marks appear. It's part of getting old, I guess. Marks appear for absolutely no reason. Oh, strange body. Blueback Black Flip, one of my favorite names. Hi from Colorado. Hello. Annette Anderson. Greetings from Jacksonville, Florida. Hello, Annette. I think you're new. Please let me know if you're new, if this is your first time here, because I don't recognize that name. And hello from Jacksonville. Sean, just plainly tell me how to have the shift from person to presence. Take your attention off the person and put it on the presence. Just spend more time withdrawing your attention from the evidence of the senses, from the sense of being a person, and onto the sense of being. Do everything you can to become increasingly aware of where you are looking from and not what you are looking at. The person is always an appearance, right? If you can see it, it's not you. If you can perceive it, it can't be you. Obviously, there would have to be two. You're not two, so you can't be perceived. So if you can perceive it, it's not you. And then just feel your own presence. Feel the sense of being. That's it. Don't try to make this more than it is. You're experiencing it all the time. If I ask you right now, do you exist? Are you? You would pause for a second, and you come back and say yes. Now, where was it you looked? You didn't go out and check your car to see if you existed. There's a sense inside of all of us, and it's always there. Every time you look, it's there, right? It's not like following you around, waiting for it. It knows when you're going to look, and it hops up there to be there when you look, and then it disappears. It's always there. Whenever your attention comes back, there's that sense of being. Now, the mind thinks that sense of being isn't very important. Yeah, okay, great. Everybody has it. It's no big deal. It is. That's it. That is what you're looking for. That's presence. Everything grows out of that. Don't let the mind distract you and say, well, shouldn't that be like, fireworks and, you know, special effects and, dancing angels and dancing donkeys or whatever? No, it's this simple. It's this ordinary. It's this sense of being. That's presence. Are you present? The answer is yes, right? Where were you looking? You were looking to your presence. You referred to that sense of being, right? That's it, my friend. That's it. Now, if you're talking about the long term, making the shift so that that becomes the sense of I, that is the process that I'm telling you to do, and I'm telling you as plainly as I possibly can. Take your attention away from what you are looking at and put it increasingly on what is looking. Do your daily life, but every time you think of it, that's what you do. Ah, yes, right. Back, I'm the presence. This is the experience. And you'll find yourself being drawn in to the experience. When you are drawn in and identified with the experience, poof, you are the person. That's the person arises, right? The person isn't there all the time. It arises and disappears. The moment your attention goes back to the presence, the person is gone. And now there's just experience happening, right? So that's it. Is that plain enough? Do I do it again? I'm happy to keep going. And I'm happy as many times as you need it, buddy. Ducks. Hey, ducks. Hey, GP. Here in Greece, there's an ancient saying, Gnothi Safton. Did I say that right? Noti Safton, which translates, know thyself. Yes. It is inscribed on the temple of Delphi. Yes, it is. I find it a sufficient enough advice and a reminder. Yes. And it's a powerful one. Truly know thyself, right? I mean, that's all I'm talking about. Know yourself. The you think you are is not you. So you can't know that. You, your true nature, your real identity is consciousness, conscious being. To know yourself is to know yourself as conscious being, not to know all of the various attributes and characteristics and patterns of behavior, which you can easily tell got added later. They were accumulated over time. They're not original equipment. What was there originally? The sense of being, conscious awareness, undifferentiated consciousness, which is still here. Yes, mind has divided things up, sorted stuff out, categorized stuff. It's useful. It's a useful convention. We can have conversations about even great stuff like this because of that. But that's not who you are. The undifferentiated consciousness is that in which it all appears, and without it, nothing could appear. There is no existence without consciousness. Being and knowing are one. There couldn't possibly have been anything prior to consciousness. What would it have been? That's pure speculation. That's the material model, and it's wrong. There can't be anything prior to consciousness. Okay. Sophie Austin. Hi, Sophie. Dear GP, regarding the flow of energy, I am knowing the union of love in the I am unseen coming into human self, bringing safety, love to encourage surrender as I am takes care of everything with gratitude. Oh, Sophie, that is so beautiful. Yes, the true I am, God, the true self is love. How could it be anything else? If it wasn't, it wouldn't be loving itself, which means it would be eternal torment. I mean, really think about it. If the nature of being was not love, being would be eternal misery. But love loves itself. Consciousness adores itself. And therefore it is eternal bliss. It is eternal ananda. And that flow of energy, that's what all of this is, right? There's nothing solid here. It is a flow of energy. And when you get to the lowest level, when you see energy as it actually is, you realize that it is consciousness. Consciousness precipitated as a flow, which appears as form, but it's consciousness. We are in the process of non-dual inquiry. We're looking for the essential consciousness, that which is there prior to any form. But once that happens, we turn around and realize that all form is consciousness. It says in the Heart Sutra, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is it's pure consciousness prior to anything, prior to thought, pure existence, being, pure being. But it takes form. And so what we call energy is consciousness. This is the mistake. This is the materialistic mistake that is why scientists remain so baffled by the whole thing. They're looking for a substance. You are the substance. Consciousness is the substance. Energy is what we call it because we don't realize that it is consciousness. Everything you see is consciousness. There's not two. There's only one. So this and this and this are all the same essence. And that's the unity of it, and that's why everything is actually love. That's the nature of love, is that I'm looking at myself. Not personally. Consciousness is looking at consciousness. What else could it see? What else could there be outside of consciousness? John, thank you, John. SS, hi, GP. After listening to these talks, it seems that it takes a while for this realization to be fully embodied. Or is it that life is all about seeking? No, it's not. No. Seeking ends. Seeking ends. And it ends when you realize that you're not who you think you are. The energy, the momentum of seeking can continue for a while simply because it's, if you've been on the spiritual path for many years, it itself has become a sense of identity and a habit. The nervous system, one time you just might have been purely, you might have been, very religious. I've had several people come to my meetup groups who were actually part of, they call them cults now. We just call them fundamentalist Christian groups that they managed to free themselves from, and now they're on the grasp the non-dual path. So the nervous system made the transition from complete and total conformance to that strict environment, and made that transition, as the nervous system does, because it's just a process of adaptability, to spiritual seeking on a much higher level. But eventually that culminates in, I am what I thought. I am consciousness. That which is looking, what you are looking for is where you are looking from. And at that moment, there's no more search. What are you looking for? It can stop like that. But the energy, the momentum of searching, the momentum, the habit energy of the recurring thoughts about a separate self are still going to be there. Let me make sure I'm so you could say that yes, it can take some time to be the fully realized Buddha, right? But that's not important, right? The realization, however small, then turns within to the rest of you and begins to embody that. If I'm not the separate self, well, I can start acting like who I really am. So when I'm eating, I eat as the true self. This is the true self eating. And I just start seeing it in the minutiae in everyday life. Oh, this is I am the true self. So this is the true self having dinner. This is the true self, making love with my partner. This is the true self at work. This is the true self doing dishes, driving the car. And you just begin to embody it. You let it sink in. You provide an inner space, and your nervous system will, of course, adjust and adapt to this space that you provide for it. The problem people have is they have a realization. The habit patterns of thought and behavior are still there, so they doubt the realization rather than doubting the habit patterns. Because the realization, obviously, you saw it was true, you knew it was true, but doubt arose. Well, where did the doubt come from? Well, the doubt arises from a separate self. Does God doubt who she is? Does God get up in the morning and say, oh, God, am I really God? Am I really God? It doesn't happen. So those thoughts can't possibly originate in the true self. So you just, oh, I get it. I get it. So yes, there's the energy that is a habit energy of having identified yourself with the separate self for so long is going to be resistant to being forced out of that pattern. That's the nature of the energy system. It's always resistant to change. What do? You provide this incredibly beautiful, wide open, accepting, loving space. That's all you have to do. You don't have to force it out. You have to make yourself think differently. Just catch yourself when you've kind of been mesmerized into it, fallen into the trap. If the doubt recurs, you just, okay, there's doubt. Go into the doubt. Embrace the doubt. Where's the energy of the doubt? Who's the doubt coming to? Who is the doubt referring to? Who's the doubter? And use it. Engage with it. And that'll deepen the realization. And you'll find that what you're doing in the process is you are removing the energetic doubts that have been stored in the body and in the nervous system for decades. The sense of a separate self is not just a thought belief, it is an energetic assumption. It is embodied in action. It is embodied at a level of belief that is below the level of conscious thought. Beliefs are not thoughts. Beliefs are an energy pattern that give rise to thoughts that reflect those beliefs. But if you see the belief reflected in the thought, you go, okay, well, that's not who I am. That's not me. And there can be a feeling of resistance to it, right, as well. But don't be fooled. Just because there's a feeling of a resistance doesn't make it any more real or true than a thought of doubt. And so you just don't fight it, because it's like a Mongo, right? Don't shoot them, you'll just make them mad, right? Don't fight it. It's where you don't have to. Just see it. And turn towards it. Again, turn towards it. Open, create space. If there's space, no defensive posture, no energy habits can survive when the environment in which they are living is not fighting them. If the environment is open and spacious, the nature of your energy system is to conform to the space that it's in. And so if it's open and accepting and loving, that energy will begin to dissipate, the doubts will dissipate, and it'll begin to fill this space. And you'll find that your life is beginning to reflect the revelations that are coming to you. And the revelations will become deeper and more consistent and more fun and more creative. And you never know, you may find yourself sitting on YouTube talking to people all around the world. Thank you, SS. I just have this feeling that I wonder if I just slow down for a second. the questions are coming, and there's more here. I'm going to get to them for sure. But remember, there's just a very fundamental little that has to take place. Awakening is not a big grandiose event. It's a very subtle, small shift of perception. And all the steps, the things I talk about, the thing any teacher talks about, are really just to kind of clear the path for that little shift to take place. And the shift is simply looking more towards your own experience and less towards the ideas and explanations and interpretations of experience that we've all been indoctrinated into. It is the experience that you are having when it has been liberated from all of the ideas about it that you've been taught, that you have the actual pure experience. It's that setting in which the non-dual understanding awakens. We have all been taught to defer to some kind of an external authority. It could be scientists, it could be priests, pastors, rabbis, amens. It can be the Brahmin leader. It can be people with a bunch of letters after their names. It can be politicians. It can be CEOs of companies, or even managers of companies. We're always invited to distrust our own experience and interpret our experience from the perspective that somebody else has given you. The essence of non-dual inquiry is to come to trust your own experience more than the beliefs about it you've been taught. So when I ask you to put your attention on consciousness, that is, notice that it is you who are conscious. You are hearing my words, right? Now, what is the nature of that consciousness? Now, when I ask a question like, what is the nature of consciousness? Which is to say, what is your nature? Who are you? Those three are the same question. Who are you? Consciousness. Who are you? It is then that our ideas about consciousness, it's an emergent property of the complexity of matter, it's a soul inside the body, it's a little piece of flesh, in the forehead, it's 7 chakras. All of those are ideas, and if you believe them, they will color your experience. It will seem as though, well, yeah, that's what I'm experiencing, my 7 chakras. What I say is, when I ask that question, I don't want you to refer to anything other than your experience. How you experience consciousness, which is how you experience yourself. Not any thought, but to look at your experience. What are you experiencing in this moment? And you'll find that you are experiencing a sense of being, an intuitive, indescribable sense of presence, and that you are experiencing a great diversity, and that you really have no idea what any of it is. That is our real experience. If you're going to know yourself, you have to go to yourself. If I want to learn about working on, I want to learn how to repair cars, I give all my attention to the car, don't I? If I want to learn how to, if I want to learn how to do accounting, all of my attention goes to accounting, right? I give it all my focus. If I want to learn who I am, all my attention must go to me, not to what people say about me, because that's just their perception of me, but to me. Now, what do you experience of you? What is your experience of yourself? Nothing extra added. No extra thoughts or ideas or interpretations. Just the pure experience of yourself. You say, you are. That's the essential experience, your own being. Now just stay with that and add nothing to it. Your mind won't like it because your mind wants to engage in descriptions, but you can't describe this, right? Because you're not comparing you to anything else, which means all description is impossible. Description requires this compared to that. Right? So we're only looking at you with no reference to anything else, just the pure experience of yourself. Now, with just that pure experience of yourself, is there anything lacking? Couldn't be. You have to compare it to something. No comparison. Is there anything lacking? Is there anything out of place? Is there any suffering there? Now, yes, I know there are feelings running through the body and there's sensation, there's stuff going on, but that's fine. We can concern ourselves with all that later. Right now, forget about all of that. Right? That's just, that's the stuff that is being perceived by you. We're only talking about you. Right? Not what's being perceived, but just you. This one without a second. The only thing you actually really know. The only experience you ever really have. Is it noisy there? Can you find a boundary to it? Is there anything missing? Now, this is your real experience. Yes, thoughts about you and ideas and people's associations and stuff that's been learned colors that. Makes us think we're experiencing what they say we're experiencing, but this is what you are really experiencing. This is really you. Boundless, timeless, incomparable, indescribable. And yet, you are, and you know you are. And you have no doubts there. Is there any doubt in this space? I just felt the need to do that. Janet McGowan, hi GP, you are still the constant gardener. Another Glasgow, hello. Got all my friends in the UK. I got to try to make it up there soon. Sean, hi Ava, sending love to you, love and to all NG. Thank you, Sean. Gee, I feel like an egg ready to hatch, but the doer is always on board. Don't worry about the doer. The doer is just a thought. It's just a thought. That exercise, was there a doer there? Did you need to do being? Did you make it happen? Was there anything you needed to do? I always get so rumpled looking. I always forget. Pay attention to the camera look, right? Is there anything to do there? Keep coming back to that. Yeah. Even the egg's already hatched. The hatching of the egg will simply be a wonderful experience happening in front of the awareness that was never in an egg in the first place. Robert Hill. Hi, Robert. Hi, GP. Sometimes my wife turns into a monster when she gets angry. It's like it's someone else. Yes, there is that. When she does, it triggers immense anxiety and anger in me. Her dad was a mean drunk. Any advice? Yes. Yes, indeed. You know, when I was speaking earlier about the rage somebody was feeling, there is the rage that comes from, I mean, we all feel it. I've been in the grocery store or in some public place and you see somebody hitting their child or yelling at them. I've seen grabbing him and shaking them. And, our shared being makes that impossible to look at and not feel like something needs to be done. It's obviously it's difficult because it's their child, it's their world, they can do what they want, sort of. But at the same time, there'd be nothing wrong with saying, please don't do that. They're going to remember that for the rest of their lives. It's going to cause them pain for the rest. Please don't do that. And they'll get offended and that sort of thing. But, and you could do that. You could do it lovingly. The idea is that the behavior is reprehensible, but you understand that behavior is arising out of that sense of a separate self. It is robotic, and it is a reflection of their suffering, and it is their conditioning, which they are still blind to. Now, in an instance like this, it is more of something has triggered her own deep pain. Right? One of the reasons why anger comes up is the nature of it is to push away, right? To hurt. It's very much a defensive posture. What that means is that there's something extremely vulnerable that feels very frightened, right? That it feels very threatened, and anger is the tool it's used because it's worked in the past to push away, to keep that from being exposed. And of course, when that happens, beautifully, Eckhart Tolle refers to that as the pain body, and I think it's a very appropriate way to put it. It is an energy within us that arises, but remember, it is a protective energy. It is always there because it feels threatened. And if her father was a mean drunk, then she had to find ways to keep herself safe. And with the mean drunk, it can be anger and violence and invisibility. Just don't be seen. If you're not seen, nothing can happen to you. I suspect there's probably some of that with her as well. And so an enormous amount of compassion and understanding has to be brought to bear. First, you start with your own anger that's coming up, and I know what that feels like. I've been in relationships with people, and these things come up, and they see nasty, hurtful things. And when I was less conscious, they would get to me, and I wouldn't know what to do with them. But as I became more conscious, I realized what they were, what was happening. Right, so first you have to deal with your own sense of vulnerability and isolation. Because when your partner, right, your life partner, your love partner, right, the, the one who, for at least for a time, could do no wrong in your eyes, right? This was, this was the god or goddess incarnate, right? Is suddenly like beating you up, um, which is exactly what we felt as children, right? And that same kind of relationship with our parents, who then turn around and do these things to us. So first, get in touch with your own sense of vulnerability and isolation, because she isn't just hurting you; she has basically denied you access to her. She has cut you off from what you loved, right? Right? Because she's protecting that, because she's not sure about it. She's not, I mean, because it got abused, right? She, of course, as a little child, was loving her father, and he's abusing her as a mean drunk, which is totally confusing to the child. It still has to reach out for the love. So there's this thing in between. And she wants that love. She wants to be seen. She wants to feel that love. But it is the most vulnerable thing in the world for her to do. Her nervous system assumes that if there's some kind of that there's some kind of outward pouring of that, it's going to get hurt, and hurt badly. The end result is that the relationship gets deprived of her, of, of the beauty of her, of all the qualities that you loved about her. And I imagine when it isn't triggered, she's there, which is why you're still together, and she is there, and she's still lovable, and she's still the woman you fell in love with. Um, so start with you, right? Your own vulnerability about it. The fact that, yes, when that happens, your vulnerability is triggered. Own it, be with it, and the pain and sadness and grief of, in that moment, your wife is dead. She's gone. She's not there. And there's a subtle fear she's not coming back. Right? She will, of course, because she's really there. But there's these layers and layers of stuff on top. And so you have to completely remove from you, as best you can, anything you're doing to contribute to that environment. I don't mean you being mean to her, because I know you're not. But I mean any kind of withdrawing, any kind of holding back yourself, right? Because she was deprived of the love that her father's drinking problem literally deprived the family of him, right? So there's this gaping hole in everybody. So can you allow yourself to step up to being the loving presence, even a loving fatherly presence? Not trying to pretend to be a father, I don't mean it like that. But one of the powerful things that a romantic relationship can deliver is that it can provide, if it's conscious and open, you can literally let yourself become the father or the mother to the other, the loving version of that, which is total acceptance and openness, which provides a space in which the deepest childhood wounds can actually be healed. Now that doesn't mean you become the the codependent, where you're the neighbor, right, where you become the mother. I don't mean that, right? That's psychological distortion, and it's disastrous. But what I mean, it's inevitable that we project on the other a certain sense of our own mother and father. It's inevitable, right? It's part of the package. Now, if we're conscious of that, we can use that as an opportunity for healing the childhood wounds to the point where it's just completely absorbed in the universal motherhood of pure love, right? So you can step into just the total acceptance of her as she is, including this, as difficult as it is. Because, of course, all of our original trauma was caused by not being accepted as we are. You got to change. You got to be different. You can't be like that. And of course, that's the trauma that creates the disconnect from our soul from which we suffer, and it's out of that whole that the separate self gets created. It's created to compensate, to try to compensate for that whole. It's not a it's 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 a bad thing in the sense that it's not real and it doesn't really provide any possibility of true happiness and satisfaction. But it's not a bad thing in the sense that it's a natural function, and it popped in because it had to. The alternative was you just would have died. And so your wife can't turn into a monster. Their nervous system is highly triggered. And if you can just get to that space within yourself, you're going to provide the space in which she can as well. And I don't know how open she is to these kinds of conversations like we're having. If you'd like to learn about EFT, the workshop I'm going to be giving is really helpful for dealing with these. Especially if she's already conscious enough that she can take some ownership with it, even after it's happened. Sometimes these triggers take us over, and it can be a week or two later we go, oh my God, what did I do? Right? Well, we can shorten that time. So it's not a week, it's a couple of days, and then it's a couple of hours, and it's a couple of minutes, and then it's right as it's happening, and then it's before it happens, and then it's before the impulse even arises, and the trigger is finally dissolved. But at some point, a conscious awareness that says, oh my God, I'm triggered. When I'm triggered, I'm not me anymore. I'm somebody else. I'm this other protective monster. I'm the dragon guarding the virgin and the gold, right? Because I have to, right? And as far as her nervous system is concerned, it's a mandate. She has to, right? And you can see why. She did have to, right? And it just became the habitual pattern. So I hope that helps. And thank you for such a heartfelt share in this environment. Thank you for that. That's courageous on your part, Robert. Sean, message retracted. Okay. Where did it go? Sean said, G was in jail for 6 years for acid and E. Why? Was that me? Gee, G was. I was? Gee, I was in jail for 6 years for acid and ecstasy. Wow. Was that me? No, that is a sick, decadent system that punishes the innocent in order to keep us conformed. The drug laws in your country, my country, were insane, and it was admitted. When LSD and psilocybin and all those, and marijuana, when those all got criminalized. Well, marijuana got criminalized because after prohibition ended in the United States, there was a whole department dedicated to it, and the head of it didn't have a job, so he created one. So he invented the marijuana scare so he'd still have a job. I mean, it was completely selfishly. I mean, it was all a lie from beginning to end. And then it was in the early 1970s, late 60s and 70s, when all of the psychedelic drugs were made illegal. And it was admitted by John Ehrlichman, who was one of the Nixon's aides, that they made the whole thing up because they were just trying to get some way to be able to start putting people who were protesting the war into jail. That was the whole point of it. It was a lie from beginning to end. It was oppressive. So, no, was that you? If your answer is none, like, was that me in jail? Like, none, yes, it was you. Yes. Was it legitimate? No. My God. Ah, insanity. But this is the world we live in. It's my dander up. If any of there's familiar, that's an old phrase. It gets me angry when I see that kind of hypocrisy and out lying. And the media in the United States is nothing but propaganda. 6 large companies own 98% of all of the news outlets, which is why they all show exactly the same thing, and it's all lies from beginning to end. That's the world we live in. So was it you? Was it your fault? No. Was it you that had to go through it? Yes. Unfortunately, yes. Wooter says, yes, a home run, G. Very cool home run. Home runs are cool, aren't they? Yeah. Even if they only score one run, they're cool. Dale Wiggins, good afternoon from Massachusetts. Good afternoon, Dale. Dave Maloney, hi, G. Why do we do things in life that we really don't want to do? Uninspiring things that don't make us feel alive, I mean. God bless you for all your amazing content. Well, thank you. And well, first off, we do things that we don't really want to do because we think we have to, and habit, right? But we get into habit of being a certain way. It starts as children because we have to conform to the environment we're in. Now, the nervous system's number one job is stay safe, stay alive, right? And so it simply conforms itself. It adapts to the environment. That adaptation is what we call conditioning. And it is the baseline behaviors, beliefs, feelings, thoughts, assumptions, reactive patterns that when a sense of self develops, it projects itself onto that set of behaviors and patterns. It doesn't realize that it is just behaviors. It becomes me. Identification with conditioning happens, and that's actually the nature of the separate self. That's why I can say it doesn't exist as a separate self. It exists as a collection of processes. Those processes and functions of the nervous system, when they are identified with, that identification holds them in place. When identification begins to be withdrawn from them, they're seen just as functions. The power that they have becomes less. But in the beginning, this is all happening automatically. You have no control over it whatsoever. You're barely even there. I mean, you're a kid, right? Your nervous system is simply responding to the environment, conforming itself to guarantee that it survives, right? So, and it will, of necessity, have you doing things you don't really want to do, being things you don't really want to be, wanting things you don't really want. Why? Because that's what's required to survive. The initial flood of consciousness that begins as you begin to awaken isn't just this, great, oh my God, I'm God, there's nothing but God, it's all one and beautiful. There is some of that, but then it runs into this, right? That same consciousness, awakening, turning on a light in a dirty room. You see the dirty room. You're quite awake. And you might, turn off the light, I want to go back to sleep. But you can't. You can't unsee it, right? So, yes. Now, we also live in a culture that wants you to be that way. Capitalism is just an extension of the master serf and the slave, master slave, and aristocracy and serf. That's all it is. It's just exchanged a little bit of money for a total subservience to somebody else's will. To make people want to do that, they have to convince them that they need to and that they want to, right? So I'm going to live an uninspiring life. I'm going to work for the next 40 years sitting in a cubicle somewhere, completely unnatural, cut off from nature, cut off from life, most of the day away from family. There's nothing natural or healthy about that. It's a systemic thing that benefits a very few. And of course, it's not going to make you feel alive. If you don't feel alive, it means you are not being yourself. If you're being yourself, you feel alive, right? So that not feeling that is the sign something's wrong. Turn inward. Something's away. Now, you may not immediately be able to go out and change your circumstances and say, I'm not doing this anymore. Quit, walk off your job. You're not be able to do that. Maybe you got a family you have to take care of, or maybe you just, you got a responsibility. Maybe there are parts of it you do like, right? But if you pay attention to the fact that I'm not feeling really alive and inspired and happy, and you honor that, you are opening the door actually experiencing that aliveness. Because if you first don't realize you're not feeling alive, nothing's going to change. You know, the awakening has to turn the light on in the dark, in the dirty room, right? Oh, it's dirty. You can start the cleaning process and start going, well, what does make me feel alive? When do I feel alive? And start that kind of an inner inquiry. But the reason we don't do it is, it's habit, right? We're afraid. Oh, if I do what I want, I won't make a living. Oh my God, I heard that all the time. Yeah, but how are you going to make a living, right? I was an artist. My parents were not, right? Actually, my mother was. She trained to be a concert pianist. I just learned this recently. That's what she was training for. And something happened. I'm not sure what, but then she hated it. She wanted nothing to do with it. Oh my God, the last thing she wanted me to do was take a piano. Everything I would sit down to practice. Can you had to do just one thing after another, conditioning me to always feeling like no matter what I was doing, if I was enjoying it, there was something else I should be doing. That was a conditioning, pure conditioned pattern. It still pops up because I never fit the mold that they wanted me. Never, not one thing that they wanted in their perfect son, I was. I was exactly the opposite. I could have been the biggest blessing in their life, but instead, for them as a curse. So it was like this my whole life. So my whole conditioning as a child was to be fighting. If I was doing something that I loved to do, I was always looking over my shoulder and feeling guilty about it. Right? So we're trained to do that. And then we're trained to suppress our own natural desires, our own natural tendencies, our own natural urges and gifts in exchange for what we're told we're supposed to do. And that extends from your immediate family to communities. I grew up in the Midwest, right? You know, you are not supposed to ever have highs and lows. Everything is middle of the road. There's I think it was Garrison Keillor who said, in the Midwest, you get happy. Somebody would just say, don't worry, it'll pass, right? You know, live hard, live a good life, work hard, and then die. That's it. That was the ethic. You know, that was my upbringing. You see how well I fit there, and how grateful I was when I finally got moved from there to San Francisco. Boy, what a difference. That's a whole story. Anyway, this is how it happens. And we have a culture that's encouraging. Look around. They don't. The powers that be do not want thinkers. They do not want people who are critical. They do not want people who are being themselves. They want, your value isn't your value as an individual. Your value is market value. You know? How many kids got pushed into computer programming in the 90s only to have it completely crash? They were all living after the dot bomb in 2000. They were all living in the basement of their parents because they couldn't make a living. They went from $100,000 a year to, getting jobs on Fiverr, right? Because the society pushed them into something that it valued rather than, who are you? What do you want? What's natural to you? What are the gifts that you want to share? These are the questions that should be asked. These are questions I'm asking that my son and I and a granddaughter, right? So, because this is what we want, right? This is the way it should be. But nothing is working in our culture. This is you're the maverick now. We're mavericks now, right? But we have the truth on our side. This is what life is really meant to be. So thank you for that, Dave. Let's see. I am running out of time. We got a ton of things here. Let's see if I can kind of look through here closely and see if there's something that stands out. Hi from Brazil. Hi, Evaldo. Dale says, I'm going to speed up the answers here, folks, so forgive me if I don't elaborate a lot, but I do want to just try to touch on them. Dale says, I'm not sure if it's post-awakening come down or midlife crisis or both, but I'm increasingly disinterested in my usual activities lately. Do you believe in post-awakening letdown? Maybe I just need to keep on and try some new activities. I don't believe in it as a matter of fact. Again, see, people have an experience, it becomes kind of a common experience, and then suddenly it gets turned into an idea and gets a label. You know, what was your experience? That's the only question. What you're experiencing. Okay, and we're using words like, you know, there's a sense of a come down, a sense of a midlife crisis, because you're describing to me an experience you have. So let's put those aside now. Post awakening and midlife crisis, all of those things, put those away. There's a natural transition in all of us as we grow and expand, and the ultimate growth and expansion is awakening, that it has an effect on the functioning of our body, and has an effect on what we could call that sense of a separate self, the you in the world, the manifest you, not just the pure consciousness you, but the you, the one that's walking around. For me, it's GP. For you, it's Dale, right? And of course, it's completely natural for that to lose interest in some things and start getting interested in other things. You know, it happens all the time. Look at kids, you know, they you don't have to force them to put teddy bears away. They just go away, right? There are so many horses that get put up for sale, you know, because they're very popular with adolescent girls. Um, uh, and, you know, if a family is well-to-do, they have a horse and all of that. But then there comes a time when suddenly it becomes more about boys. They get to older and teenagers, and these horses go up for sale. There's nothing unnatural about that. This is the way it is. You don't have the same interest now that you did when you were 20 or when you were 10. The problem is that in our culture, when you get established, right, you're expected to have the same enthusiasm for your job at 40 that you did when you were 30, right? Or you're 40 or 50. And it's absurd. It's nuts. We don't have a flexible culture. Of course you're shifting. The awakening has a profound effect. And yes, I do believe in a post-awakening sadhana, a way to embody the awakening in your life, practices for for uh, for embodying the awakening in your life. But of course, it's going to shift your perspective, because when the separate self is in charge, the desires are its desires, right? And well, it's not 100% accurate. All desire arises from the self. It's natural. It comes from the true self. When it gets commandeered by the separate self, every desire becomes the separate self trying to enhance itself, solidify itself, make itself special, right? Right. And so the desire can get lost in that. But as that begins to dissolve, that need is going to dissolve. The other thing that comes up, the thing that people would call a midlife crisis, is that you find that a lot of your life has been doing what you were supposed to do, conforming, and not really what you wanted to do. That's the crisis. Oh my God, I've not been living my own life. I've been living somebody else's life. But of course, when it happens at midlife, you're like established. You got mortgage, and you live in a world, right? So now, when you're 10, you just, you know, the teddy bear just doesn't get picked up anymore. That's it. No harm, no foul. But when you're 45 or 50, um, oh, oh, suddenly it feels like it's a threat. It's not. Believe me, the same power that brought you to awakening will make all of the adjustments needed for that to become embodied. All you have to do is stay true to your vision, honor the discomfort. You know, notice there's a feeling of letdown. Don't try to patch over the letdown, but go deeply into it. Find out what it's made of. And you'll find that what's really happening is the false you is being stripped away, and more of the real you is beginning to emerge. The 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 human you is beginning more and more to become transparent to the transcendent you. more of the reality is beginning to shine through, because the with the dissolving of the separate self, the 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 human being, the human persona becomes much more transparent, much more flexible. And so more of the reality of you. Believe me, Rumi put it beautifully. He said, "The power that brought me here must take me home." That which brought about your awakening will complete the job. All of it. All you have to do is completely surrender to that and push nothing away. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Dale. Oh, let's see. Okay, I'm going to have to go a little. What's the roll of thought? Do I need it? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh. I could spend another hour here, folks, and I can't. I can't do that. So let's just cut it here. Um, mm. Please know that while I might not have gotten to your question, the answer to your question comes as a result of you asking it, which means it is being answered. It may have been answered by what I said before. It may just come just within your own heart, within your own mind. But nobody's ever left without an honest answer. Is like a prayer. and God is a sucker for every prayer. Cannot deny the honest request of an open heart yearning for truth. Cannot do it. So please like and share this. I'm going to be giving this class on EFT, which is a technique I use. From my perspective, I teach it both as a spiritual tool of practice and also as a therapeutic tool for people who aren't, on this kind of a spiritual path, but are, just developing themselves. It works in both cases, but as a tool for helping to embody the non-dual understanding in everyday life, using an energy technique like EFT is actually very helpful, and I have found it very, very helpful for many, many people, which is why I teach it, and which is why I still use it. Please get the series of videos. If you haven't, just go to IRTAP or gpwalsh.com/IRTAP, TAP. You can register, and you'll find out about the workshop. You don't have to register to watch the videos. You don't have to register to be in the workshop, but please do, because it helps me know how many people are going to be there. And this workshop, like the other ones I'm doing, is completely donation. I'm doing it differently this time. Before, I'd ask for donations, and when you made a donation, you got into the class. This time I'm just doing the class, and I'm saying, if it's worth something to me, just donate what you can, because this is how I keep Satsang on the air. This is how I keep the lights on, and all the lights and the camera's rolling. So in the meantime, trust your own experience and let yourself explore. Non-duality it's not like an answer. Oh, there's the answer. The answer is your life. The answer is a constant unfolding of the nature of who you are. And so the answer is your life. The answer is your experience. The mission, the goal, is to come to see your experience through completely unfiltered eyes, through a mystic eye, through the spiritual eyes, through the eyes of the Holy Spirit, to see your life as God sees it, and you find that it is God seeing it. It is the ultimate, the absolute, the great I am. So, thank you all for being here, and namaste.